From the Oklahoma newsroom, this is an OSU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Kyle Fredrickson. Kyle, Tyreek Hill back in court on Monday in Payne County after the charges against him. You were there for this hearing. What did you see? What was sort of the news of the day?
You know, it was certainly kind of an emotional setting for sure. You know, this was a preliminary hearing, which basically means it's the prosecution side, which in this case is the state. It's their turn to show the evidence in the case, present their witnesses, to basically develop the groundwork as to whether or not there should be a trial. So in a case like this, there's three different things they're really relying on. Some photo evidence of the victim's injuries in the few days after the alleged assault took place, and testimony from the investigating sergeant, Kyle Bruce, and the alleged victim, Crystal Espinal herself. So as you can imagine, having her recount those events in front of a judge, family members on both sides were in the courtroom, certainly did get emotional. We learned a few different things about the evening. Apparently the argument was sparked by some text messages that Hill had seen on Miss Espinal's phone. That kind of started a bit of an argument that escalated into violence later in the evening. And it'll be interesting how it proceeds, because in cases like this, as we've seen before, having that physical evidence and knowing what happened without actually having witnesses is a tough thing to prove or prove against. So the next court date is going to be on April 17th, an arraignment that's one step closer to what could very well be a trial.
Well, and you know, you don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of time for plea deals, for agreements, and those sorts of things to be struck. But from what you heard and you know, sort of listening to both sides, do you feel like that's something that might happen, or is this going to go to trial? Because like you say, I mean, this was emotional just for a preliminary hearing. If this thing goes to trial, it could really be intense and could be a lot of really damaging and you know, disturbing information out there.
Well, you're right, and as of what we know just right now, all signs point that it's going to go to trial, and that's not necessarily a surprise, because in the preliminary hearing, it's really a time for each side to make a very strong case for their side. Obviously, with the defense in their mind wanting to disprove the evidence and to prevent a trial from ever taking place. And it's going to be interesting to see how it moves forward, because obviously with the prosecution side, you have the injuries, you have the testimony from the victim. And with the defense, so far what we saw in the preliminary hearing, the things that they're going to touch on, Espinal's emotional history. They even mentioned self-mutilation in the past, whether or not she could have had these injuries put on herself. And you know, you're getting into extremely touchy subject matter, and it kind of points back to why these cases sometimes are underreported or don't make it all the way through the process, because when you have these kinds of serious allegations on both sides, you know, it's just a very sensitive topic without really any hard proof.
Lastly, I know obviously the important thing is the victim's health, this case, those sorts of things, but I think people are wondering, now that Tyreek Hill is no longer a Cowboy, what's his future look like? Is he given any indication as to what's next for him?
Well, that's a great question, and we would love to know when the family was there outside the courtroom after the hearing took place. We tried to ask them about what Hill's future might be. Cheryl Ramsey, his attorney, also declined to comment on it the last time that we saw them at the arraignment. So right now, there's no official word. But because Tyreek Hill was run off of campus, there are some NCAA bylaws that might allow him to transfer and play somewhere else right away. It's the same thing Anthony Hickey did at LSU. Granted, the reason for Hill being run off of campus is so serious, you wonder what kind of school would take a chance on that guy. So depending on how this process takes place, if this ends up being a trial that could very well not start until 2016,
right,
it's hard to say that a team is going to take a chance on this guy. But if it somehow does get settled before then, and Hill can kind of put this in his past, at least relatively, it wouldn't be a surprise to see a lower division team take a chance on a guy with all-world talent on the football field.
All right, we know you'll be following it. Thanks, Kyle. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.